Okay, let me get this on here. So yes, I'm the Summit County Housing Director. And so Summit County, Colorado, here's a little topo map. It's a mountainous community about an hour west of Denver. Relatively high elevation. The two lakes are at 9,000 and 8,000 foot approximately. So not a lot of developable land, as you can see, a lot of mountains and some river valleys. We're home to 4 world-class ski resorts, Breckenridge, Copper Mountain, Keystone, and Arapahoe Basin. There are 6 small towns that make up Summit County: Breckenridge, Frisco, Silverthorne, Dillon, Blue River, and Montezuma. And our population's about 31,000. So we've grown a little bit since the 80s. And interestingly enough, the number of housing units within Summit County is also right about 31,000. But so technically, it doesn't sound like we have a housing issue, but it's kind of divided up into a third. About a third of those housing units are short-term rented. A third of them are just vacation homes, and a third are occupied by locals. So earlier this year, our Board of County Commissioners declared a workforce housing crisis. And Summit County has always been challenged with attainable housing. But during COVID, it was really magnified. When the economy started to shut down, a lot of our workers left, and a lot of remote Zoomtown workers moved in. And, I would assume that that's happened to a lot of your towns and areas where you live as well. It seems to be a theme across the West, across the country. And, the state has been looking at as opening up some funds to help facilitate new housing projects and programs. So I want to take a look and just kind of go through some of the policies, tools, and strategies that Summit is currently using to help mitigate that workforce housing crisis. Right now, I would say that we have like 4 pillars to our housing strategy. It's review and audit of our code, the preservation of existing housing stock and those associated programs, new development, commercial conversions such as hotels to housing, and then also just collaboration that the county has been doing with the other towns within Summit County. Starting off first, I'll talk about code strategies. One of the very first things that we did that was easy to do was waive all of our fees that were associated with workforce housing projects that we had control over, building, planning, engineering. We didn't necessarily have any control over sewer and water because those are separate districts. But we wanted to help reduce the barrier to entry, associated with fees in regards to workforce housing projects, not necessarily free market rate projects. Our workforce housing is significantly less than what free market sells for or rents for. The other thing that we started doing, or strategies that we're working on, is going through our housing and land development code. We realized that our land development code, there are a lot of areas where we can probably be more efficient, streamlined, and help facilitate workforce housing. Some of those things may be like lesser restrictions, or maybe just going with, for wetlands, for example, just going with federal setbacks. Currently, the county has setbacks on top of federal setbacks, and that can really minimize some workforce housing developments. And there's a lot of areas within our process where we can really streamline and reduce the amount of engineering involved for the first look at workforce housing developments. A part of our development code is the housing code, which goes into a lot of details about workforce housing, certain AMI targets for both rental and for sale, talks about ADUs, caretaker units, and without going into great detail on the housing code, one of the things that several of the things that we're moving forward with is changing the AMIs to make them more lenient and flexible to help facilitate private sector development of workforce housing. We're taking a look at our ADU standards, accessory dwelling units. Currently, our code does not allow standalone ADUs. It has to be incorporated within the home and their size requirements. So we're going through all of that. We're also looking at taking a look at how we could incorporate tiny home villages and also shared amenity housing, because those were silent within our housing code, and how that, and we're going to take a look at those opportunities and how they might help us in the future. One of the things that we did with the state is we applied for a grant, and were recently awarded an $82,000 grant to help bring in a third party auditor and go through our land development code to help us find new opportunities to make workforce housing easier and more streamlined. As one segment of the housing code, the ADUs, we have a lot of ADUs within Summit County that are probably non-compliant and don't meet the standards. And then if anyone's built anything recently, the cost of construction has really gone through the roof. And so we're putting together a grant program for new ADUs and non-compliant ADUs. It hasn't been put together yet. It's one of the things we're going to start working on beginning of the year, which will be probably in the range of $30,000 to $60,000 each to help owners subsidize the cost of building these ADUs. It'll come with a deed restriction that'll require it to be rented to local workers. And there's been a fair amount of interest in people wanting to build these ADUs. And it's great because, the county's not building it themselves. We're paying a partial subsidy, but the owners are taking the lead and getting them built. As a part of that ADU grant program to help kind of facilitate the creation of additional ADUs across Summit County, we're going to put together a stock plan set, probably 3 or 4 different plans for standalone ADUs that will soon be allowed, which currently are not allowed. The town of Denver recently did a similar type program. And what we'll do is, if you called an architect right now in Summit County, it would probably be a year or 2 years before they could even work on your project. So if we have a set ADU plans that are already approved, there will be certain tweaks with engineering and grade, et cetera, of course. But are approved that can be incorporated into an ADU plan development, the stock plan library, if you will. That will greatly speed up the process and reduce the cost of getting ADUs built within Summit County. We're also going to look at modular ADUs. There are companies out there that already have kind of the stock library of module standalone ADUs. So we're going to be working with them as well. So you can build a stick-built ADU out of our stock plans, or a modular out of a modular program all ready to go. One other thing that we're going to do to help kind of facilitate the ease of getting ADUs built is work with CHFA, which is the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority. They're interested in working with us to create a favorable loan program for owners to get loans to build the ADUs. So in combination with them providing low interest rate, favorable lending for owners, a grant, and then also stock plans to choose from, we're hoping to increase the amount of ADUs available and reduce the cost, and also reduce the amount of time to get them built. Another zoning consideration that we're working on, and which has been fairly contentious, is short-term rentals. So our Board of County Commissioners has adopted a short-term rental moratorium in September, and to kind of give planning staff a chance to go through and look at our current rules and regulations, look at the overall layout of Summit County, the short-term rentals and what's going on with them, and kind of develop put some checks and balances in place, because until just the last couple of years, there was absolutely no regulation of short-term rentals within Summit County, unincorporated Summit County. And a couple of years ago, we adopted a permitting process And then we really had a chance to start tracking them. And there's about 4,400 short-term rental permits within the unincorporated Summit County. That doesn't include the towns. There's another, 5,000, 6,000 within all the towns as well. So one of the things that we're doing is going through and creating overlay districts, creating different short-term rental types, distinct license types, in order to put the brakes on the short-term rentals to a degree, such as we'll have resort zones, neighborhood zones, resort permits, primary occupant permits, and then also a middle permit that is more of the second homeowner that has restrictions on the number of days allowed to short-term rent. That hasn't been adopted yet, but it probably will be by the end of the year or beginning of the year. It's in process right now. Simultaneously, we, the housing department, put together what we call lease to locals. It's a short-term to long-term rental conversion incentive program. We had taken a look at all of the various areas within Summit County, the local neighborhoods, and a lot of that information was used to help build and create the various zoning overlays and permit types for the short-term rentals. But we had put together a survey and surveyed the short-term rental owners within these local neighborhoods to get an understanding of how they're using them, what type of money they're bringing in with them, then how much the occupancy use is, and if they'd be interested in converting over to a long-term rental and what those incentives might look like. So lease to locals is what we call an emergency pilot program to see what we can do to convert some short-term to long-term rentals for this winter ski season. And the incentives that we put together are quite high. But if you look at the overall cost of housing and what it costs to develop here in Summit County, one bedroom probably cost, depending on the individual circumstances of the land, $250,000 to $300,000 to develop a bedroom. And that's going to take quite a while as well. So we've been up and running now with lease to locals for just a little over 30 days. And within that first 30 days, we've been able to bring on 16 units, which is housing 27 local workers and their families. So a total of 32 total people being housed within the first 30 days. And it's costing about $7,000 per bedroom. If we look at the $7,000 per bedroom compared to the cost to build, it's a small fraction. Some of our other programs, which we'll talk about, Housing Helps, that's about $30,000 a bedroom. That's where we purchase a deed restriction to convert to help preserve existing inventory. And then our hotel conversion, that's about $10,000 a bedroom. So it's still, it's a short-term. It's a short-term solution. It costs a fair amount, but it's also the smallest amount out of all of the options that we have and tools within our quiver. Another housing preservation strategy that I just mentioned, Housing Helps. So Housing Helps is where we will pay you, a property owner, to place a light deed restriction on your home. So we're purchasing a property right. That property right, we're going to pay you somewhere, typically about 15% of the market value of your home, to place the deed restriction that does not allow short-term rentals and requires that the home be occupied by a local worker. That local worker can be yourself, or you could be an investor and rent it to a local worker. That's costing us, like I said, about $30,000 a bedroom. And we have some cost sharing agreements with some of the towns. So on average, it's about $75,000 per unit. Another strategy that we use, but not as frequently, would be our housing buy downs, where we actually just purchase a market rate home and put the Housing Helps deed restriction on it, and then resell it at a below market price that's affordable to the local workforce. Those are the housing preservation strategies. Another strategy that we looked at is new development. So what we did is we started with taking a look at all of the county-owned land, thousands of parcels, and filtering it out by developable land and then also non-open space land, because open space is a high priority in Summit County. And we ended up with about 12 parcels that were probably suitable for workforce housing. And as we got further into those parcels of land, about 5 of them are parcels that we're moving forward with. And 4 of those 5 are 2 acres or less. So a lot of very small opportunities. One of them is 45 acres, and we're working through to try to build a 436 unit master planned workforce housing development. But that being that size, it has some infrastructure constraints and issues that will slow it down, and it'll take a little while for us to work through all of those issues and get that developed. But again, we just didn't have, there was a popular misconception that Summit County was sitting on all of this land, which we do have a lot of land that we sit on because we buy mining claims and strip the density off of those mining claims to move into the towns, and then use those mining claims for land trades with the Forest Service or something else similar to those lines. But we did not have very much developable land. Another building strategy is working with the Forest Service. So in the 2018 Farm Bill, the Forest Service was given the authority for the first time to lease non-priority or administrative sites to local governments. Within just outside of the town of Dillon, there's an administrative site that they had previously used for housing, and then also some maintenance and boneyard operations. And the Forest Service, housing isn't necessarily what they do. So they had incurred millions of dollars worth of deferred maintenance that they're going to have to spend to get the housing up to standards again, because the maintenance operations just were not taking place. So we're in partnership with the town of Dillon. We're looking to take the Forest Service administration site, lease it on a long-term lease with the Forest Service, and build, it's probably not going to be 203 units, but maybe 175 workforce housing units. Some of those will be dedicated to the Forest Service and for their housing needs. And that's going to be some of the in lieu kind of trading on that Forest Service lease, so that they are getting their housing objectives met. And in addition, they are utilizing land, letting us utilize land that is a low priority for them and is not necessarily being utilized to the full extent with its current use, and renting it out to the local jurisdictions for long-term workforce housing. Another strategy that we used in going through the new development was taking a look at some of the other projects that had happened in the past with partnerships. In this case, Wintergreen Ridge, or Wintergreen, I should say, was a workforce housing project that the county helped subsidize in partnership with Gorman and Company. And there were 47 extra units that did not get developed for one reason or another, but that density was still out there. So we went back to Gorman after our land audit and like, hey, let's build the rest of that density out. Do a site plan amendment, create a new partnership. We went to the state for LIHTC housing funds. We were actually awarded just recently the federal and state low-income housing tax credits. So that project is moving forward. The county is going to contribute $15,000 per unit to match the state's contribution on top of the 4% federal tax credits. So that was another property that was sitting out there that we brought back to life. Another property, this one is going to be in partnership with the town of Breckenridge, and we're going modular construction. The cost of building has gone up substantially in Summit County. The labor is hard to find, and there's a lot of competition for market rate builders as well for all of the trades and all of the components within getting something built. So the county and the town of Breckenridge are working with Fading West Development, a modular factory, and also developer about an hour and a half away in Buena Vista to build 54 apartment units within the what we call our Justice Center parcel. We need to come up with a better name. But so this will be our first modular development. Excuse me. Our last pillar of our housing strategy is looking at older hotels, commercial uses, and converting them into long-term workforce housing. Our first project is the Alpine Inn in Frisco, where, I mean, ironically enough, they were having a hard time staffing it, so they couldn't keep it staffed. And they reached out to the county because we were talking about looking at these types of opportunities. We were able to strike up a master lease. It's a 2-year option. We would like to buy it. They're not quite sure if they want to sell it yet. So hopefully we're able to buy it and make this permanent workforce housing. But for right now, we're doing a master lease and leasing out the units. There's 38 total units. There's about in total 60 people that are being housed there. The way we structured this deal, because we weren't putting in a lot of investment in redeveloping it, just in case they don't sell it to us. It's primarily, it's a nice hotel room. It is queens and king beds. There's a common kitchen, a lot of common space for lounging, eating, etc. We structured it so that there was a priority of 80% AMI or below. We held a handful of units for 4 units with a priority for small businesses to master lease. And we held on to a couple of units for the county as well for our sheriff and transit departments. They are constantly having issues trying to hire. And we made the rents, basically it's $850 per room. No first and last, it's just a deposit of $350. So it is $1,200 to get in. Leases are 3 months to a year. We're happy to break them because what we're finding is people are using that, they get displaced. Their housing falls apart, whether it's they were renting and now the owner is going to short-term rent it and they don't have anywhere to go. So they're landing here. And so we're using this as transitional housing until they're able to find something more permanent and probably more to what they would like to have other than a hotel room. But we have had a lot of really good feedback. People are really happy for it. It's a low price and very flexible leasing. We are in negotiations with another hotel, and we're looking at other commercial areas to do this with as well. But this is our first and only one to this date. But we hope to do some more. And lastly, I just want to talk about our local government collaboration. Here in Summit County, we have what's called the Summit Combined Housing Authority, and that housing authority is created of all of the jurisdictions within Summit County and the county. And the sales tax initiative that the housing authority has ran, and which was recently approved and extended for another 20 years, is the backbone behind the counties and all the other towns' housing projects and programs. Currently, 0.725% of sales tax dollars go towards housing. So that brings in the amount of sales tax dollars continues to go up quite a bit every year. So that's bringing in for the county in total ends up with about $3.8 million in housing funds with these 2 funds and with some impact fees. And then also another housing fund that we have that is based off property taxes. With all of our housing projects, we've worked with, we work with the private sector. We also work with the towns. And with the town of Breckenridge, we built Huron Landing, which is an apartment complex, Coteau Flats, an apartment complex that we ended up utilizing primarily for county and Breck housing to staff our employees. We're working on the modular Justice Center property with them. With the town of Frisco, we've partnered to build the 146 unit Lake Hill project. we're working with the state of Colorado to purchase the state's workforce center property. And then the Alpine Inn was actually within the town of Frisco, and we worked with them to get expedited zoning to change its use from hotel or commercial to residential. The town of Dillon, we're working with them on the U.S. Forest Service compound and associated, that project will also probably need a roundabout that we will need to build on Highway 6. And all of the towns in the county, in July, we held a housing action initiative to kind of talk about, housing moving forward, what's working, what's not, and what we're looking to, what we can do to be better. And with that is kind of the summary of workforce housing in Summit County. And happy to take any questions.
Feel free to unmute yourself or write something in the chat.
If anyone has questions, after the fact, feel free to email me as well at jason.dietz@summitcountyco.gov. Jessica, you might be able to make my email available as well, which you may have already have. I don't know.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jason. I lived in Summit County years ago, and you make it sound attractive enough to want to move back, except for the housing cost.
Right.
The lease to locals, is that just a cash payment to the landowner or the homeowner?
Yes, it's a cash payment, and it's two separate payments, one within 30 days of the tenant moving in, and then one at the end after the tenant has fulfilled their lease obligation.
Great, thank you. I think I had another, but I have to look at my notes and come back to it.
Yeah, no problem.
Commissioner Hammond?
I've got a question.
Yeah.
On your short-term rentals, I think you said you have 30% short-term rentals, 30% second homes, and 30% people that live there full-time. Is that right?
Yes.
So why did you not
Yeah.
just say no more short-term rentals? At least phase in that kind of a, because that would have given you 30% right there. Not, even if you had to phase it in over years. What was the reasoning behind that?
I would say there was a lot of people wanted our Board of County Commissioners to do that. That's not the direction they ended up going. And when we look at those 10,000 short-term rentals approximately that are in Summit County, a lot of them are outside of unincorporated Summit County where we have control. They're within the town, majority are within the town of Breckenridge, Frisco, Silverthorne, Dillon, et cetera. We looked at Summit County as basically the resort areas of Keystone and Copper Mountain, where we feel that is where short-term rentals belong. We don't have a ton of hotels up here, and so short-term rentals have kind of filled that need. There's currently many hotels being built and under construction, so maybe that will change. But the commissioners, that was one thing that some people advocated for. I would say that they were under a lot of pressure from the property management and real estate community to not go that route, and they went with the route that they chose of kind of going within the neighborhood zones. There's a wide variety of neighborhoods in Summit County, some more catered towards workforce housing, and some that will probably never be workforce housing just because they are quite expensive, large or acreages or 40-acre type parcels. So they wanted to take a more surgical approach than just banning them all outright.
Commissioner Hammond?
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to kind of ask, what is the relationship between the county and your office and the ski corporations when you talk about Keystone and Copper, and what they can do differently, or that you can actually kind of coerce them to do for workforce housing?
Yeah, so Keystone and Copper, each of them have PUDs, which outline rather large PUDs, but within those they outline the housing requirements that they have to fulfill to be within good standing and have the zoning in place to operate. So they have been building employee housing, workforce housing per their PUD requirements, as they expand, create additional businesses. They're different, they're not the same. So they have several hundred, several thousand bed credits, because within the PUDs, it actually talks about it as bed credits, depending on, the time of the year, the seasonal worker, and just a lot of different factors. So the county, when, the ski resorts got approved, that was contemplated. It is probably time to update, the Keystone PUD. That's like on the planning department's to-do list is Keystone PUD amendment, both Keystone. And I'm not sure that Keystone's looking forward to that, but there are several triggers and obligations that they have to meet that currently they are all in compliance. There was a period of time where Copper was starting to lag. It was kind of, it was starting to catch up to them, but they've recently built a series of workforce housing projects and are in compliance and above compliance actually for their housing requirements.
A question from Alice Cannon. How are you able to gain agreement between the various jurisdictions on housing production goals and strategies?
We're not always, especially, but we do typically, over the years, we have found common ground within how we structure our projects, our deed restrictions. That took a lot of time, a lot of meetings and working together. There were some towns that felt that the county or Breckenridge were kind of driving the process, and they didn't want to go that way. But after years of kind of working together, and through the Summit Combined Housing Authority, where we kind of all get together on a monthly basis and talk about these housing issues, where all the towns are a member of, we have found a great deal of common ground, but we're not always on the same page. But we've been fortunate enough to find common ground on the projects that we're partnered on.
Commissioner Steve Kramer.
Thank you, Jessica. Jason, thank you. This is an interesting concept. My question is doing the math that you've stated today. Where did the BOC find all this money to give all the subsidies and to encourage these kinds of developments? Thank you.
It was, through the Housing Authority's sales tax initiative, ballot initiative, that there's been several. The first one in 2006 was a 0.125% sales and use tax initiative. In 2014, an additional sales use tax initiative of 0.6% was added to that for a total of 0.725%. That goes to all of the jurisdictions on proportionate share. So if Breckenridge's sales taxes, their proportionate share was 5 million. Breckenridge typically has the highest sales taxes, and they're the highest portion of the housing sales tax dollars go back to them. Then it's probably the county with the ski resorts that are in the county, then Silverthorne, Frisco, Dillon. It bounces around, but it was a sales tax initiative because workforce housing is expensive. It's expensive to build. It's below market. The programs are expensive, and we have found in Summit County, prior to those sales tax initiatives, there weren't a lot of housing projects that really happened. So there were some, but the market was not filling that need, because it's below market. All of the housing's below market. The locals can't afford local market rate housing, and there's just the supply and demand imbalances very much out of sync in Summit County, given that there's not a lot of developable land. There's a very large demand for people within Colorado and outside of Colorado to be in Summit County. And so the Housing Authority with the sales tax initiative got the funding in place to create the housing programs and strategies and projects.
Commissioner Hamlin.
Yeah, one of my questions was, have you guys done a buildable lands inventory? Because like you mentioned, you guys don't have a lot of area to expand. Similarly here in the Columbia River Gorge, we're kind of limited by how much space we have due to the scenic area and federal land holding. So, but I was in Summit County in the 80s and it was already feeling tight. You guys must really be feeling squeezed.
Yeah, we have, definitely gone through and did a land, we called it a land audit. And, there are certain areas like in the lower blue where a lot of ranch land where we're not looking to change the zoning and increase density. We're trying to keep density where density is within the towns, within the developed areas. We have a TDR, transferable development right program. We have an open space department that purchases mining claims and ranch lands and other open space lands through significant view corridors, removes those development rights and put them in a TDR bank for developers to purchase. Workforce housing is exempt from TDRs, so it's somewhat like a density bonus. But yeah, it's we have gone through and taken a look at that. All the easy land, developable land has been developed. So it's primarily the hard stuff and rebuilds that are left over.
And how do you define workforce housing? What percentage of AMI?
Yeah, so we look at it with our housing code at the housing code addresses it at 125, for sale up to 120% AMI. But we've recently looked at it like with the Housing Helps program. We're not trying to cap it at 120% AMI because there's still, even a doctor, if they moved into Summit County today, is not going to be able to afford to purchase unless they sold something and had a fair amount of capital to invest in real estate. But so workforce is now not only just AMI, although we primarily build the lower AMI projects with the county dollars, but we do try to have that stepping stone from lower AMI rental projects to higher AMI for sale projects to no AMI deed restrictions like Housing Helps, so that people can kind of step up the housing continuum and ideally into market rate housing. Although in the last year or so, the market rate ceiling has shot through the roof.
On the ADU amnesty grants, what has been the impact or response on that?
We haven't rolled that out yet. That's something we're looking to do the beginning of the year. There has been a lot of positive response, but time will tell if we're able to get the ADUs converted over into compliant ADUs that meet building code.
Do you use a real estate sale or transfer tax similar to Pitkin? Is that Pitkin, Colorado?
Pitkin, that's Aspen. Yeah, so
Okay.
Aspen is a real estate transfer tax that funds their housing programs. The county, because of Tabor, we're not able to do that anymore. But existing real estate transfer taxes are grandfathered in, and so that funds the Aspen Pitkin County Housing Authority's housing programs. We do have a couple of PUDs that have transfer taxes. It's a small dollar amount compared to the sales tax initiatives, and the town of Frisco and Breckenridge, they do have some grandfathered transfer taxes within them as well. But it's not the lion's share of our housing funds. are not through transfer taxes. It's through the sales tax initiative.
I was definitely thinking about the funding questions, and I was glad Commissioner Kramer raised some of that. And I had heard you talk about the sales tax, so it was good to hear about how those two ballot initiatives that made that happen. That's what I think, thinking about our region. So we cover 5 counties, a couple in 3 in Oregon and 2 in Washington. And Oregon, there is no sales tax at all. So between the counties and the different cities and communities, there's a range of feelings on this topic and a range of issues. And it's interesting to think about how we can move forward.
Yeah, it seems like people handle the tax in some states. Property taxes are really high. Colorado, they're really low, and so they tax in other areas.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Hammond?
Hi, one of the things that, unless you've lived in a place like Summit County, you don't appreciate is how much it swells in population when the ski season's on. So kind of give us an idea of how much increase in population you see from the off season to the real time when people are there.
Yeah, so let's see, our population is around 31,000. Peak population is probably 150,000. So it goes up dramatically. And this Christmas to New Year's weekend is the biggest by far. And then also 4th of July weekend is just as big, quite honestly.
Well, any more questions for Jason while we've got him here?
I just have one more question. So you guys have, you have sales tax, regular sales tax. I mean, not for this already.
Yes.
Okay. So how hard, I mean, we don't have sales tax at all. So that's just a whole nother giant hurdle to surpass in itself. But when you asked to do this thing for the housing, it was passed within your county. Is that correct?
Yes.
And was it fairly easy to pass it? Or did you have to have a couple tries at it or what?
It was overall fairly easy. Next door, Eagle County tried to do the same thing without a lot of public outreach, and it failed, and they don't have a sales tax. So I would say that this was before my time, that the Housing Authority, the Board of County Commissioners were fairly strategic and putting together the marketing plan for the housing sales tax, and it was successful. Every time that they've ran it. And then again, just recently, the 2014 ballot initiative had a 10-year sunset, which was going to be in 2024. And this last election, it was they added 20 years to it because the locals that live here, they've seen what we've done with those tax dollars. They've been supportive, and just how much it costs to create workforce housing. They've recognized the value in it, the challenges associated with it, and again, recently, just in November, easily passed it.
So in your position at the county, was created and funded through this sales tax?
Yeah, so the housing department within the county came into existence in the end of 2016. It was at the department, but it came about as that sales tax.
Anybody else? This is some good food for thought.
Yeah, so in Summit County, the tourists pay for probably the bulk of the housing.
Mm-hmm. And our Hood River County, for example, they looked at doing something like that for public safety. And it did not pass a few years ago. Well, thank you so much, Jason. I appreciate you taking some time, and thanks to all of you for being here. We will get these materials posted to the website and send it out to everybody. So thank you again so much. And
All right. Yes, thank you. Sorry I missed last month, and you guys all have a great day.
you too.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.